Water recedes from a flooded, ruined earth, and a small bird leaves the pitch-covered window of an ark. The dove is not a mascot for human tranquility. It is the physical embodiment of a desperate, unrelenting search for a resting place, of the world outside the garden walls. She possesses a mind completely at rest in the presence of her beloved. Later in the poem, she returns the exact same imagery. She says his eyes are like doves beside springs of water, bathed in milk, sitting quietly beside a full pool. It is an image of total, refreshing abundance. The water is cool to the touch. The thirst is completely quenched. There is no desperate searching here. The bird that once flew over an ocean of death has finally found a garden of life. This is the exact intimacy God has always desired with his people. A gaze that does not wander, a heart that does not fracture, a devotion that locks onto its creator and refuses to be pulled apart by fear or ambition. The pattern is building, piece by piece. The flood asked for a resting place. The altar asked for a substitute. The prophet asked for a messenger. And the garden asks for a bride. The ancient poetry paints a picture of perfect, undivided devotion. But the moment you step out of the poetry and look at the actual condition of the human mind, that singular gaze shatters. You wake up in a quiet room, but the atmosphere inside your head is immediately deafening. We tend to treat the dove like a tame, domesticated concept. We put it on bumper stickers. We hang it in nurseries. The harsh blue light of a smartphone screen hits your face before your feet even slide onto the cold wood floor. And the cycle of scanning begins. You are reading emails, checking messages, absorbing the global tragedies of the morning, and looking for something to anchor your mind before the day even truly starts. If you look closely at your own internal rhythms, you will realize you are living out the ancient flight over the floodwaters. We are a generation defined by an unrelenting, exhausting search for a place to put our anxiety down. You carry it in the tightness of your jaw during a morning commute, and you feel it in the shallow rhythm of your breathing when you look at an overflowing calendar. You are constantly flying out into the chaotic landscape of modern life, scanning the horizon for a safe harbor, a moment of permanence, a place where you can finally stop performing to justify your own existence. But the waters of the culture you live in are filled with nothing but debris. You are told to find your manawash, your resting place, in the accumulation of wealth, in the curation of a flawless public image, or in the frantic pursuit of the next milestone. But every time you try to set your foot down on those things, they sink beneath you. There are people who navigate this chaos like Noah's raven. They feed on the outrage. They gorge themselves on the anxiety, thriving in the toxicity. But the biblical authors did not see it that way. In the ancient Near East, the dove was known for two distinct things: of the digital flood, perfectly content to consume the wreckage. But you cannot survive on the carrion of a fractured world. Your exhaustion is not a random psychological glitch. It is the symptom of a mind built for a garden, forced to navigate a flood. The dove inside of you refuses to land on the decaying matter of a culture that celebrates temporary outrage and disposable relationships. You are fiercely, instinctively searching for clean ground. But every direction you fly seems to offer nothing but another expanse of turbulent water. The undivided gaze of the Song of Solomon feels utterly impossible when your attention is being violently monetized and pulled apart by 1,000 different demands. You are longing for a branch. You are desperate for proof that life exists somewhere beneath the surface of the panic. And this is exactly where the ancient narrative makes its most shocking maneuver. Because the Creator does not expect you to keep flying over the wreckage until your wings finally give out. Instead, the story shifts from the poetry of the Old Testament into the muddy reality of the first-century Roman occupation. The bird is about to reappear. It is going to end its centuries-long search. And it is going to land on a human shoulder. The heat of the Judean desert beats down on the mud. The Jordan River flows thick and brown. Crowds of people line the banks. Its mournful, agonizing cry, and its fierce, desperate need to return home. It is a creature defined entirely by longing. They bring their shame, They bring their dirt. They step into the cold, rushing water. A prophet named John pushes them under. They come up gasping. And then a carpenter walks into the river. Jesus of Nazareth wades into the current. The water climbs his chest. The smell of crushed reeds and wet earth hangs in the air. John hesitates. But Jesus insists. He is pushed down into the dark water. He breaks the surface. The water drips from his beard. He breathes the dry, burning air. And then the sky violently tears open. The Greek text says the heavens are schizo-split, ripped apart, and the Spirit of God descends. It does not come as a raven. It does not come as a hawk. It comes as a dove. Watch the centuries of narrative crash into this single, dripping wet moment. For thousands of years, the ancient bird has been flying. It flew over the flooded earth, looking for clean ground. It bled on the bronze altar to cover the poorest of the poor. It ran through the storm to save a violent city. It locked its eyes on the beloved in a hidden garden. And now, it flies down to the muddy banks of the Jordan. It hovers over the carpenter. And it lands. It finally finds its Manoach. It finds its permanent resting place. And when you track that longing through the pages of the Old and New Testaments, a massive, unbroken narrative begins to form. The bird of peace does not land on a mountain. It does not land on the gold-covered ark inside the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem. It lands on a human being standing in the dirtiest river in the region, surrounded by tax collectors and soldiers. The descent of the dove is not a polite sign of divine approval. It is the cosmic announcement that the waters of judgment have finally receded. In the days of Noah, the dove brought a branch to prove the wrath was over. Here, the Spirit comes as a dove to prove the exact same thing. The new creation has begun. The dry land has appeared. And it looks like Jesus. The search is over. The Spirit of God has found a permanent home in human flesh. The bird that once absorbed the violence of the poorest sinners now rests on the man who will absorb the violence of the world. But the moment the bird lands, the mission changes. Because Jesus does not stay in the water. He walks out of the river. He walks into the wilderness. He gathers followers. And when he sends them out into a hostile, vicious empire, he gives them a terrifying final instruction involving the exact same bird. In the 10th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus looks at a small group of fishermen, zealots, and tax collectors, and he hands them a suicidal mandate. You realize the writers are not just throwing in a random bird for decorative effect. They are tracking the movement of God's own presence. He is sending them out into the meat grinder of the Roman occupation. The roads are heavily guarded. The religious leaders are setting traps. The metallic scrape of a Roman broadsword being drawn from a leather scabbard is the soundtrack of their daily reality. And his strategy for their survival is a biological impossibility. Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Most people read that sentence and imagine a balance between being smart and being sweet. But when you look at the Greek text, you realize Jesus is demanding something much more difficult and infinitely more dangerous. The Greek word, translated as innocent, is akarios. It is an ancient metallurgical term. It literally means unmixed or without alloy. If you melt down a block of heavy gold over a blistering fire, and you do not dilute it with cheap lead or copper, the metal is akarios. It is pure. It holds its exact composition, no matter how much heat is applied. When Jesus tells his followers to be like doves, he is pointing back to the undivided gaze of the Song of Solomon. He is pointing back to the bird that refused to land on the rotting flesh of a dead world. He is warning them that when they walk among the wolves, they will be tempted, looking for a place to dwell among a deeply broken people. But to see the pattern, you cannot start at the baptism of Jesus. To use the wolf's teeth, when they face the sharp edge of a viper's fang, they will be tempted to strike back with the exact same venom. The innocence of the dove is not naivete. It is a refusal to become the monster you are fighting. Jesus is not asking them to be blind to the danger. He specifically tells them to have the tactical awareness of a snake, but he demands that their core remain entirely unmixed. They are to walk into the darkness, absorb the violence of an empire, and refuse to let the terror change their internal chemistry. Like the poorest widow, bringing her wicker basket to the bronze altar, they are to become the physical substitute for a fractured, angry world. It is the ultimate subversion of power. To carry the spirit of the dove into the empire of the wolf requires a strength that violence can never comprehend. It requires a heart that knows exactly what the world is, and chooses to remain a harbor of rest anyway. But the journey of this bird does not end in the dirt of the first century. The flight path echoes across thousands of years, leading to a single, unshakable conclusion about who God really is. You have to step back into the ancient text. You have to breathe in the damp, heavy air of a wooden box floating on an ocean of judgment. A dove flew over a flooded, ruined earth and found a single green leaf to prove the wrath was over. A destitute woman brought a wicker basket to a bronze altar, and the grace of God covered the debt she could not afford. A runaway prophet plunged into a violent sea and carried salvation to a city drowning in its own violence. A king looked at his bride in a hidden garden and saw an undivided devotion that refused to look away. A tired generation scans the modern flood and searches fiercely for a permanent place to put its anxiety down. A carpenter waded into a muddy river, and the spirit of heaven found a final resting place in human flesh. And a small group of fishermen walked into the teeth of an empire and proved that an unmixed heart could outlast the sword. One thread, one story. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the dirt floor of the tabernacle. Not the massive bulls or the wealthy worshippers, but the small, rough, wicker basket carried by a woman who had absolutely nothing else to give. The fact that the creator of the universe built a loophole into his own holy law. Specifically, because before the dove can ever find a green branch to bring home, another bird has to take the sky to make sure the poorest, the most broken person in the camp could still walk away clean. Your exhaustion is not a sign of failure. It is the proof that you were meant for a garden, not a flood. If you are in a season where you feel like you have absolutely nothing left to offer, and your mind feels like it is constantly flying over a chaotic expanse of water, looking for a place to land, stop trying to produce a perfect, massive sacrifice. Stop trying to find a safe harbor in a culture that thrives on the wreckage. The vine does not ask the branch to perform. The river does not ask the dove to build a nest. If this opened something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted from flying over the floodwaters. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who has never once stopped searching for you finally become the resting place your soul has been aching to find. If you open the ancient text of Genesis to the 8th chapter, you find a detail most children's Bibles completely erase. Blood drips onto the bronze grate of a wilderness altar as a poor family hands over the only sacrifice they can afford. Noah does not send the dove first. He sends a raven, and the raven never truly comes back. The scripture tells us this dark bird simply flew back and forth over the waters until they dried up. It is a strange, unsettling detail to include in a story about salvation. Until you understand the biology of the bird itself, ravens are scavengers. They are carrion birds. When the raven flies out over an earth utterly destroyed by a global flood, it looks down at a massive, floating graveyard. It sees the debris of judgment bobbing in dark, muddy water. To the raven, this devastation is not a tragedy. It is an endless banquet. The raven is not looking for a restored creation. It is perfectly content to feast on the ruins of the broken one. Noah waits. The text does not tell us what he felt as he watched the scavenger vanish into the gray sky. But eventually, he reaches into the wooden beams of the ark, past the thick smell of damp animal fur and hardened pitch, and he releases a dove. Biologically and historically, the dove is the exact opposite of the scavenger. A dove will not land on decaying matter. It refuses to touch carrion. A prophet boards a wooden ship smelling of salt and cargo, running in the exact opposite direction of God's voice. It requires a clean, solid, living place to set down, When the dove flies out of the narrow window, it scans the exact same ruined horizon the raven saw. But it finds nothing acceptable. The Hebrew text is highly specific. It says, "The dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot. So she returned to him into the ark." The word used in the ancient text for resting place is manoach. It implies a state of quietness, a settled condition, a permanent and secure home. What makes this fascinating is that manoach shares the exact same Hebrew root as the name Noah himself, which literally translates to rest. The author is constructing a profound literary mirror. The man named Rest sends out a pure bird to search for a place of rest. This is the very first time the dove appears in the biblical record. Right away, a theological framework is being laid down. Brick by brick, the dove is established as a discerning creature, something that fiercely refuses to compromise with death, something that simply cannot exist where decay is present. When it finally flies back to Noah holding a freshly plucked olive leaf in its beak, the true weight of the moment hits you. A carpenter rises, dripping wet from the cold current of the Jordan River, and the sky tears wide open. The message is not merely that the water level has dropped. The message is that clean, living earth has finally re-emerged from the devastation of judgment. The bird has established its identity as a seeker of pure ground, a creature inextricably linked to the concept of finding a safe harbor. But hundreds of years later, when the descendants of Noah become a massive nation, wandering through a harsh desert, the role of this bird violently shifts. The dove is not brought into their encampments as a pet or a symbol of hope. It is brought to a bronze grate, and it is brought to bleed. Dust kicks up in the Sinai wilderness. 1 million people camp under a burning sun. At the center of it all sits the tabernacle. Smoke rises. Blood pours. Fire consumes. The wealthy bring bulls. They drag massive, heavy animals to the bronze altar. The middle class brings sheep. They bring goats without blemish. The sound of bleating fills the air. The smell of roasting fat hangs heavy over the tents. But a woman walks through the camp with nothing. She has no herd. She has no land. She has no wealth. The dirt floor of her tent is bare. She carries a small, rough wicker basket. Inside the basket sits a turtle dove. Same bird, again and again. You have probably seen it on 100 stained glass windows, or stamped onto the logos of international charities. According to the book of Leviticus, the sacrificial system has a strict hierarchy. If you sin, you bring a lamb. If you are unclean, you bring a lamb. But God builds a deliberate loophole into his own holy law. The loophole is shaped like a bird. Leviticus chapter 5 lays it out. If a person cannot afford a lamb, they can bring 2 turtle doves. If a woman gives birth and is entirely destitute, she brings a dove. If a leper is cleansed but has absolutely no money to his name, the priest accepts a dove. Bulls require land. Sheep require pasture. Goats require upkeep. But doves can be caught by a beggar. The priest steps forward. His hands are already stained red from the wealthy men's cattle. He takes the small bird from the woman. He wrings its neck. He pinches off the head. He sprinkles the warm blood against the cold side of the bronze altar. He tears the wings, but does not sever them completely. He throws the bird onto the fire. It is a violent, visceral reality. The dove is not a lesser sacrifice. It is the grace of God made accessible. God specifically designates this bird as the offering of the poorest of the poor, the untouchable, the marginalized, the people who have absolutely nothing else to give. If you cannot afford the heavy machinery of the sacrificial system, God says to bring the bird of peace. Bring the bird that searches for rest, a white dove, usually hovering with an olive branch in its beak. Most people assume the dove is just a universal shorthand for peace. The blood of the dove stains the bronze. The smoke rises, just like the smoke of the bull. The weight of the pardon is exactly the same. This small, mourning bird becomes the physical substitute for the lowest caste of Israel. It absorbs their impurity. It carries their guilt. It bridges the gap between a holy God and a destitute worshiper. It takes the violence so the broken can walk away clean. Centuries later, a young carpenter and his teenage bride will walk into a temple in Jerusalem. They will carry this exact same bird in a basket. They will buy it to redeem their firstborn son, because they are too poor to buy a lamb. But long before Jesus is born, the dove takes on another form entirely. It leaves the tabernacle. It stops being an animal, and it becomes a name. Unroll the thick, animal skin parchment of the Hebrew minor prophets, and your finger will trace a story about a man who runs. You know the outline. God tells a preacher to go east to the brutal, skin-flaying empire of Assyria. Instead, the man walks down to the seaport of Joppa, pays the fare, and boards a wooden cargo ship smelling of tar and salt. Sailing west. The man's name in your English Bible is Jonah, but the word written on the ancient scroll is the Hebrew Yonah. It is the exact same word used in Genesis chapter 8. A gentle, the harmless creature sent out to let a terrified family know the worst of the storm was over. A nice, poetic image. Yonah literally translates to dove. It appears 32 times in the Old Testament, and its etymology is deeply rooted in the idea of lamenting. The root verb yana means to oppress, to suppress, or to mourn. In the ancient world, the dove was known for its mournful, agonizing cry, and Jonah is the prophet who does nothing but complain, weep, and lament from the moment God calls him to the moment the book abruptly ends, under a withered plant. When you realize this prophet's name is Dove, the entire architecture of his rebellion changes. You are not just reading a historical account of a stubborn preacher. You are watching a massive, intentional reenactment of the Great Flood. Think about the parallels. In Genesis, a dove is sent out over a chaotic, raging ocean to see if the wrath of God has subsided. In the Book of the Prophets, a man named Dove is violently cast out into a chaotic, raging ocean to appease the wrath of God. Noah's dove searches desperately for a place of manowich, a physical resting place. Jonah goes down into the lowest, darkest parts of the ship, lays his body on the rough floorboards, and falls into a deep sleep. He is desperately trying to find rest, while the storm of judgment tears the sky apart above him. If seeing these hidden literary architectures in the original language is shifting how you read the text, and it does carry a message of peace sometimes. But if you look closer at the Hebrew root word hiding beneath the feathers, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the human dove is thrown overboard. He sinks into the dark, crushing deep, and just like the bird in Genesis, eventually brought an olive branch to a world that deserved wiping out. The prophet named Dove eventually walks into the capital of Assyria and brings a message of repentance to a violent, pagan city that deserved wiping out. Noah's bird brought physical peace. Israel's prophet brought spiritual peace. This man is not just a runaway messenger. He is the ancient bird of grace, forced to carry salvation to a world drowning in its own violence. But the prophets are not the only ones to borrow the imagery of this mourning creature. Because right in the middle of the Hebrew scriptures, the bird changes shape again. It leaves the storm. It escapes the bronze altar, and it flies deep into a locked garden. Wind moves through a locked garden in the ancient Middle East. The heavy scent of myrrh and frankincense clings to the warm air. Pomegranate trees bloom bright red in the heat of the day. A king stands before a woman he loves, surrounded by the quiet isolation of the stone walls. At the exact, highly specific moments this bird is allowed to fly across the biblical text, you start to see something the greeting card reading completely misses, and he speaks a poem over her. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Your eyes are doves. In the Song of Solomon, this mourning bird becomes the ultimate language of intimacy. 6 different times in this short, highly charged scroll, the lover uses the dove to describe his bride. He says she is hiding in the clefts of the rock, He feels the cold, rough stone of the cliff and asks to hear her voice echoing in the heights. He calls her his flawless one, the only one of her mother. But the most striking image is about her gaze. This is not a physical compliment. It is a declaration of undivided loyalty. Ancient naturalists and poets observed something unique about the dove. A dove does not have the distracted, darting peripheral vision of a predator or a scavenger. When a dove mates, it mates for life. And when it fixes its eyes on its partner, it locks on. It does not look away to scan the horizon. It has a singular, unshakable focus. When the king says her eyes are doves, he is making a profound spiritual claim. He is saying, when you look at me, you only see me. The dove is not divided. The dove is not fragmented. The dove is whole. She is the dove because she refuses to be distracted by the clamor and the noise.